So just about to enter the start box. The only person that I know about before me that's completed is Tom McEwen. I knew I had quite a few seconds in hand over him, but I didn't know how Sam Watson, Julia Krajewski or Lucy Jackson had been. So just set out with my own thought process in hand. He was quite keen to start with. I got the first fence and the second fence came up really nicely, and then galloping along here before fence 3, which is sort of the first question, I suppose. It's a bit of a blind turn. You go down a dip, up a dip, and poor London 52, I tested his scope out here because I saw a stride, but the stride I saw I needed to turn in a little bit and ended up jumping the tallest part of the brush, but luckily he's a very good jumper and he just jumped over the top of it. We come along here in the first combination. The duck is quite upright, so I just took a little steady, see him just shake his head a little bit, that's him, and then rolled on down really nice 4 strides to the skinny fence, and that I felt really sort of set me up. A little bit of a galloping stretch now, so I let him bowl along. You can see his ears pricked. He absolutely loves his job. Had to duck for the tree branch there. He's quite a tall horse, not a tall rider, but I'm up high on him, so had to duck. And then a little bit here, the galloping track is where all the CCI 2-star, CCI 3-star advanced horses have all run, so I was just trying to find the nicest ground for him. This was probably the worst ride that I could have given a horse here, very deep to the table. I then cut in on my line, as you can see, then wasn't really aimed for the third part at all. He was very honest, and this horse last year he did the what was the CIC 3-star, and we had a problem at this narrow arrowhead in the water that's about to come up, so gave myself a little bit of a talking to because I'd given him such a bad ride the combination before, and I brought him back round this corner here, went out quite wide because I wanted to get my line. I'd planned to go on the 4, so I sat up on landing, got the 4, he was locked on, and I got the 4 strides out, and after this I actually took a breath and thought, right, he's on form, he's got probably the hardest question for him out of the way. It was our nemesis last year, and I felt like we settled into our rhythm a bit more. This fence came up really nicely on the 4 strides, and now was a chance to let him gallop a bit. This was a let-up fence. I turned in quite tight, a little bit of an angle, and he jumped it beautifully. And then along here, you're galloping along, and now's the time to take a breath and think, right, we've got into our rhythm, we've got into our stride, now just don't mess it up. This was probably one part of the track that the ground was quite bad, so I just wanted to keep him slightly on the bridle. As I said all along, he's a horse for the future, so I didn't want to go flat out. I didn't know what the others had done, so I was just riding the horse I had. I saw at this fence here quite a long stride. He came up out my hands, was great. Coming up to the top of the hill here, let him take a bit of a breath, and then set him up for this coffin. You can't really see on this angle of the camera, but I didn't get a very good shot in. Well, I thought I'd actually seen quite a good shot in, and he put in an extra one, but luckily he's very careful, and actually ended up jumping through it beautifully. So moving on to the water, I knew this had caused a few problems. I got him back, I got a really nice shot in, sat and waited on a slightly outside line for the 4 strides. He jumped that really nicely, and then managed to turn in quite tight to this little fish coming out, and then let him roll again. Bit of a galloping stretch here. Tried to get him to open up, and he's got a phenomenal gallop, so this was a nice bit of course to let him really try and make up a little bit of time. By this stage I knew I was slightly down, and actually just stopped looking at my watch and just thought, right, just ride the horse you've got. This was a nice let-up fence at the top of the hill, so he popped this nicely, and then the thought process coming along here is that the next fence has caused quite a few problems, so I knew I needed to get him back. He's got a very long stride, and it was running downhill, so I probably wasted a bit of time here. He actually listened really well, and I had him back to me a bit early, but I'd rather that than not getting him back, and he jumped through that. He was locked on, he was great. We've done a lot of angles in the school, and he was fantastic there, so that was another tricky question out the way. Coming along now to, another fence. This is a part of the course where they really start to feel the Chatsworth hills, and the ground gets really quite tacky and holding here. So wanted to get a nice jump over the Oxer, which he did, and it walked a nice level 6 strides, and actually I got there quite almost too easily. If I'd been braver and stayed on a slightly more inside line, which I had done on my earlier horse, then I probably could have gone up to 5, but I tried to go for the safer option. This fence actually came up really nicely, level 4, level 2, and now I thought, right, now's the time to try and make up a bit of time. We bypassed the fence that we jumped in the CCI 4-star short earlier. We just see on the right there, and again I go on a slightly outside line because this horse means the world to me. I think he's a superstar, so I didn't want to make him go through the really boggy bit, so I go on a slightly better ground, and know that I've got one more serious question. And so I set him up for the first part of the question, which is a hedge with quite a large ditch in front. He jumped this beautifully, and turning down to this corner, and I was a little bit close for my liking, but it actually helped me on the turn to the last corner because I had him already back and controlled and had a really nice turn to the corner. And now it's, I didn't know how many seconds I had in hand, so I just had to put my foot down. And just on the right there you can see Piggy French, you don't notice the crowd, but for some reason I noticed Piggy leaning in and just screaming at me to keep going. And I thought, right, please see a stride at the last, and luckily I did. And it was a bit of a weird feeling coming through the finish because I didn't know what I'd needed to do before I started. I was delighted with the horse, he'd been phenomenal, and then I sort of tried to cool him off a little bit round there, and then I heard it over the tannoy that I'd just about done enough, and then I burst into tears. I had a pretty bad week after badminton with my top horse Mr. Bass getting an injury, so it's been a really tough week. And London 52, he's come up with the goods, and he's produced the win that we needed to get us all back on track.